apologies to Kenny Loggins, but we want to be in the comfort zone, not the danger zone.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of the Get Invested podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Jordan.
And I'm Matthias.
You guys, I'm still trying to get him just like really lean into that with some gusto. Anyways, we're going to keep working on it. One of us is enthusiastic to be here. No, I'm kidding. We're both very enthusiastic to be here and talk all things investing, real estate, and real estate investing. Today's topic, we're going to make sure that we stay on top of it, stay diligent while on this topic, because we are going to talk about, dad joke, even though I'm not a dad. We're going to talk about due diligence today. I'm just going to go through crux points. I don't know, moments where you make a decision about whether to keep going or walk away.
Go, no go.
Go, no go. That's one way of putting it. Yeah. Those moments of decision, essentially, a crossroads moment, if you will. And just talk through some of that and just go back through what due diligence is and where it's at. But before we get to that, Matthias, what's been up? What's been going on with you?
Busy with work. It's trying to hit the ground running for the year as we record this. Trying to get a lot of stuff done before the end of the month of January. I think we're in a good spot. Wheeling and dealing, making offers. Hopefully we get some results from that soon.
That's actually a good reason. I mean, that's one of the reasons why this was kind of on my mind, honestly.
Sure. But one thing I did want to bring up. So Kansas got a big Jayhawks. We got a big game on Saturday playing. I think we're 14 and I think they're 13. BYU. Who?
Yes, that juggernaut of BYU athletic department. And I don't say that sarcastically. I just say it's sarcastic about the situation, not that they are actually a juggernaut.
Yes, it's basically the two of the top freshmen in the country. NBA lottery draft picks going against each other. And as they're kind of hyping it up, I'm hearing they played each other in high school and they guarded each other in the whole game. And Darren Peterson for Kansas, but ended up making the winning shot and scored 58 points in that game. And the other guy who I'm blanking on his name right now.
AJ DeBanza.
AJ. He put up 40, I want to say 49. And again, they guarded each other the whole game. And AJ is a bit of a taller, small forward kind of. So we could say that they're both phenoms in getting really to the ball, getting to the basket. Really bad but you could also say that they don't necessarily they're the two best players on their team is what happened, and they just went at each other all game. And they're not necessarily, Peterson is more of a true point guard, shooting guard.
Yeah, he's definitely more of a guard. He's 100%.
AJ is more of a maybe a 3-man, but mostly small forward type guy. So you're not going to see. I would not anticipate them to be guarding each other in this upcoming matchup. But I'm excited to see it. Kansas I feel like we've really turned a corner in the past 4 or 5 games. The heart of the conference schedule had some big wins, had some wins we should have won and did win convincingly. So I'm excited to see. We played last Saturday, so we basically had a week. I think it was last Saturday. We basically had a week off to prepare, so that'll be nice. But then we roll to another tough game on Monday, so right back at it to Texas Tech on Monday. So,
oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, so
a couple of big basketball games I'm looking forward to.
I should check because Carolina had the same thing, no midweek game, the whole week off. This is the second week in a row, actually. Which of course I'm like, what do I do with my Tuesday, Wednesday night?
I could really use that Monday night, Tuesday night game of basketball to kind of break up the week a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that we'll have that quick turnaround as well. We play Georgia Tech, not a huge matchup, but for whatever reason, it's just been a house of horrors to go play Georgia Tech. Even when we've been, we're good this year, but even when we've been way better than we are this year, and Georgia Tech has been middling at best, somehow we will go down there. It's just one of those, I don't know what it is about that place, but so we got that coming off the big win at Virginia. Obviously, want to keep that momentum going. Knocking off a top 15 at their place.
Was that Saturday night?
That was Saturday. Well, Saturday day. They moved it up to noon. Nice segue. They moved it up to noon because of the weather, and I wanted to complain about something. But now that you got me talking about basketball, I wanted to say that yes, Yeah, Debance is like 6'8", 6'9". A 3-man is a small forward technically, but the small forward position doesn't really exist anymore. It's just more wing. But he's very much that like Caleb Wilson, who's another big freshman. There's like 5 of them essentially, who they've Caleb's already played AJ and BYU in. Well, all those guys play each other and because there's travel ball and EBYL.
Sure.
And all that stuff.
You're going to run into dudes who are lottery picks. You're going to find each other.
Like they're going to run into each other. They all play in the same circuits. But we played BYU in a preseason, in an exhibition game. And then obviously we played y'all second game of the season. So yeah, Darren's definitely a lot more polished at this stage as a guard and as a scorer, but it should be a good game. You would think maybe AJ DeBenza would not guard Darren Peterson because they are playing different positions. But the question is, does BYU have anybody else who can guard him? I think they do. So probably that will be who.
Oddly enough, we played. Oh, who do we just play last? Not somebody who's a barn burner in the Big 12. It was we beat them relatively soundly, but they basically double teamed. They double teamed him on the perimeter all game long and held him to. I think he got to 20 maybe, which is I think it was like 16 or 17 points is what Darren Peterson had. Which I mean, he's put up 30s multiple times. He's been dealing with health issues, so he hasn't played whole games most of the season, and some games he never made it on the floor. So that was an interesting one to see. That was a new one that we hadn't seen people try yet. So they might have given a little bit of a roadmap to try, but then the rest of the team has taken a big step, especially in games when Darren hasn't been able to play. And they've been, so there was games in this stretch that Darren Peterson didn't see the floor and the rest of the team came out and dominated, which is nice. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I haven't been excited for a mid-season game this in a while, just because of the whole 2 freshmen on each other, slightly different, obviously styles of play and things they bring to the court. I think it'll be fun. Looking toward it. Saturday afternoon game days there at the field house. So
yeah. We'll have that coming up pretty soon because one of the other ones, Cameron Boozer, because basically it's like
Duke.
Depending on what draft board you look at, it's like Darren Peterson, AJ DeBanza, they flip back and forth, and then it's usually Boozer, and then it's usually Caleb Wilson. So we play Duke, we play Georgia Tech, then Syracuse, and then Duke. I think that may be next Saturday. So that's going to be another one of those. So yeah, we're getting into the thick of all of it, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's nice. End of January, the conference tournaments are going to be decided in the next month, basically, for the most part. We're going to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Absolutely. We've been talking about basketball, so I'll just keep this short. It's supposed to snow this weekend. And we all remember Winter Storm Fern a couple weekends ago.
Devastating.
And we're supposed to have snow again this weekend. It's supposed to be just snow, not the devastating ice apocalypse or whatever. But It's been very interesting to listen to Charlotte meteorologists because when Fern was coming for us all, now, I want to put out there, first of all, they are making forecasts based on the data that is available to them. And sometimes it's going to go a different way. There's a lot of factors, chaos theory. I buy it. Stochastic. It's all there. I got it. But why I'm bringing this up is because they got a lot of blowback from people in the area who really batten down the hatches and not a lot happened. Well, we got the ice, but it wasn't the ice storm and we didn't lose power, et cetera, et cetera. Tennessee got a lot more than we did. Normally I would be like, guys, come on. They did their best, whatever. But I actually this time was like, yeah, they kind of deserve it because the rhetoric coming from these meteorologists wasn't just like, guys, here's the storms, here's the stuff, could be some power, like, plan, prayer, what?
They're Super Bowl, man.
This is not a bread and milk situation. It's more than that. You better get ready. Be in your houses safe and snug by 4 p.m. on Saturday. And maybe it's because they don't want people to get caught by surprise, Helene, aftershocks, I don't know, all kinds of things. But felt like maybe they were leaning into it a little bit too much. So like the blowback seems kind of like, overzapped it a little bit. So now for this snow one, it's very much like, guys, boom or bust. Could be 2 inches, could be nothing. We don't know. We don't know. Just, we don't know. Just make sure
they've learned their lesson.
Yeah. It's completely different the way they're talking about it. Now, granted, it's snow and it's not this ice storm, but still, I thought that was just so funny. Again, I would normally not criticize because if they had not,
it'd been bad and they hadn't prepped people. It would have been.
They would have been all mad.
Opposite.
It was just the way that they were really throwing out these lines, especially the one the guy was like, this is not a bread and milk situation. Well, first of all, guys, never is a bread milk situation. I've never understood this as a preparation for a storm whatsoever. But I'm
It's
not.
that toilet paper. You got to get that TP.
And people were
Way
buying
more
like
important.
every single bottle of water available, and I'm like, is every pipe in Charlotte going to rupture? What is going to happen? Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you could say that they were trying to do their due diligence, and perhaps were a little too enthusiastic.
We knew it
about
was
it.
coming.
Guys, I'm a
We knew it
professional.
was coming,
I'm a
folks.
professional. I bring those segues. So let's transition to our type of due diligence. And just to get us started here, Matthias, why don't you go ahead and just remind everybody like kind of where we're at in the process of the investment acquisition, however you want to phrase it, when we're in the due diligence.
Yeah. So typically, due diligence is like a real term on a transaction on a contract for buying real estate. So it's kind of the period. So what's happened is we found a property, we've made an offer, sent an LOI, letter of intent to buy over, potentially negotiated with the seller, saying, hey, he wants these terms, I want these terms, and we've come to agreement. We've signed a contract officially. We are under contract to buy. That is the moment that starts the due diligence period, the official due diligence. Obviously, we're doing as much due diligence as we can throughout finding the property to getting under contract to make sure that it's something we do actually want to pursue, and to figure out exactly what price we're willing to offer for that opportunity based on things we find about the property. But for true due diligence, it starts the day the contract is signed and continues for as long as we've built into that contract. It could be a couple of weeks, could be 30 days, could be 45 days, depending on the project size, terms we've come to agreement on, and factors like that. So basically, that is the reason we call it due diligence is we're determining as a buyer, is the property going to meet the requirements of what we thought when we made the offer on the property? Is there something we don't know about that is going to change the calculations on price and everything? So, and there's a period where you put earnest money down, just like when you're buying a house, you put earnest money down on a commercial property. Usually between 1% and 3% of the purchase price of the property, you put down into escrow with the title company as earnest money. Hey, we're serious. Here's the money. Hold on to it. To be applied to closing, assuming you go through with it. That money goes hard, typically, meaning it's non-refundable after the due diligence period. The due diligence period is a limited amount of time you have to make sure that everything, check all the boxes and verify all the data that you made your offer on, and then to come back and say, yes, this satisfies everything that we thought, and we're going to go ahead and proceed. Or some things have fundamentally changed, materially changed from what we thought we were trying to buy. Either we need to renegotiate the price or what have you. It's not what we thought it was, and we're gonna pull out and receive that earnest money back. So we're trying to do all of those things during the due diligence period of the contract.
So I just want to be clear on the money thing. There is the earnest money, and that goes hard after a certain amount of time. That is the due diligence period, but not necessarily. Sure. That there is a period between that and closing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, there is a period after that point where you could choose for whatever reason to walk away as well, where the money, right. And then just to mention what's a little bit different is the amount of other things that have to be paid for up front during this process, including getting legal filings ready for if, the property is taken over, as the LLCs and the operating agreements and the private and the PPMs and et cetera, et cetera. There's all that. There's the inspection, which everybody has to do inspection, but there's a lot of other things going on. So the reason I say all that is because I want to, and I think most people probably know this, but there's quite a bit of money in play at this point, because what I want to talk about is what are the factors way more than others in moments of when you're deciding to move forward or walk away, go, no go, as we said. Just wanted to be clear about the fact that there's some sunk cost.
Yeah. And that's a good way to put it, is a sunk cost. So once we get to, we'll back up a little bit. We'll say, okay, we're going to, we're making an offer. We're going to start, we're getting under contract. We're to start the inspections, the legal process with the lawyers, the SEC attorneys, the building the LLCs, all that stuff. it's good to think of those as sunk costs, because we cannot let the fact that we've put money into those things impact the decisions
Right.
of the due diligence, because those are just things you have to do each time you make a property investment. So I'm glad you brought it up, because we don't take that into account when we're deciding, hey, we've already put this into it, let's just go ahead and write it out. That's not a mindset that we have. We can't have that, because I can't, until I verify that the investment is good for the investors, we can't proceed. And that's like we've talked about, that's what we're trying to verify with the due diligence process, with the inspections and reports, and all the quotes that we get on everything, and so forth. So good point.
Yeah, exactly. Just wanted to make the distinction between there's the sunk cost, there's the earnest money that at this point could be recouped. And then of course, and yes, I don't mean to imply that these things are actually taken into account when making the decision, but these are all prevailing wins, if you will. The sunk cost, the earnest money. And then there's also the fact that, of course, you hope you wanted to move forward, you want to get invested, we want to bring one to investors. I know it's very disappointing. We've had to do that where it's like, oh, we had to walk away, and then
we started up the process, and then had
like they were geared up because you want to let them know that this is coming, and then so there's just a lot of pressure in that moment. Yeah,
nature of the business.
So,
and you've invested a lot of time and effort and energy. Even if you haven't, even if there's not even that much money involved, it's still like, man, I spent weeks or months on this thing, and
right,
and to walk away is hard. But yes, you cannot take that into account.
So now we understand kind of where we're in the process and the 5 major buckets, if you will. Pass. I don't know. I haven't really ever come up with the right metaphorical noun for these, because there's so much interweaving. But the 5 tracks, I guess, because they kind of operate independently, but also are crossing, kind of like those old Hot Wheels where you could like run around and then all of a sudden they would cross. And if you did it at the right time, you could hit somebody else off. Anyways.
Yep. Got a couple in my living room.
Oh yeah, a couple. So we got 5 major considerations on track here. We got dealing with the lender. Not that they're hard to deal with, just talking to lender, getting quotes, getting financing for the loan, talking loans. You got get an insurance quote. You got to get an inspection. So these are all inflection points. That's the word I've been looking for this whole time. Inflection points. There it is. All of these can provide an inflection point, right? Getting a quote from the lender about the loan and term, the interest rate and terms, right? What is the insurance going to be for the property per door? How's that going to affect income, revenue? The inspection, what's the inspection going to find? Property management, if this is Southern Mississippi, as we've talked about multiple times, that's probably going to be a fairly straightforward process. We're going to get feedback from our partners, but that's going to be pretty straightforward. But if it's somewhere else, that's a whole different logistical situation to sort out. And then finally, of course, the biggest players for us, the investors, which that is in a lot of ways the one that kind of bounces to the beginning. It's like the forefront to the back, right? Because we got to let them know that it's like, hold on, we let you know, but we got to get a lot of other things sorted, and then we'll be back to you. And then at the end, of course, they're the ones that are going to enable us to close. So
sure.
If we're talking inflection points, I have lots of different ways I could ask these questions, like which is the earliest to arise if it's going to arise. I guess you could do a weighing factor. Like, what if you get a great response on this one, but like a not so good on this one? Where do those balance out? And then I know, of course, there's some that are just not numbers based. They're qualitative. They're not gut feeling, but they're more just a perception of the space. So
yeah, I would say to kind of answer a lot of that is it's a math game, right? So we take the insurance cost. So when we make an offer on a property, and get under contract, what makes us arrive at a price to purchase at is that we do underwriting, right? So we go, we think we have this expense allocated for this much, that expense allocated for that. We think the income is going to be this. And so, I mean, that's a simplified version of it, but basically that's what we're looking at. So basically, as we start due diligence, we start verifying those costs and those incomes. Hey, is it, as we're looking at the financials and the collections and making sure that the seller is representing that the income is X, we need to verify that it's X. If it's less, we need to know why, and so on. And so we're plugging all those real data into our assumptions and checking off the assumptions one by one. So it's very much a math process for those factors where, hey, we expected insurance to be $1,200 a door. It comes in at 1,100. Awesome, we're good. We expected it to be $1,200 a door. It comes in at $2,500 a door. Huge problem, which is all of these things have happened. So the that it's a math problem at that point. So if it comes in higher or slightly higher than what we were expecting, if it's significantly higher, and maybe that's a good discussion point. So if it's significantly higher,
I think we're talking more the margins than we are like something is blown out of the water. You're like, well, that crap.
Well, if it's blown out of the water, it's not even, it's less the math at that point. It's like, why is it so much more expensive? Like that's a risk. The risk flags start going off everywhere for the lender, for us, you know what I mean, for everybody. So that changes things when it's small fluctuations, positive, negative, it's more expensive, less expensive. It's a plug and play. We make sure that everything's kind of in the range that we expected. And then that, hey, there's enough of the things that came in less expensive to offset the things that came in more expensive, which is always the case, so that, hey, our parameters are generally correct from our assumptions. And that's the math side of it. Like, hey, we make sure that everything's kind of, the income is enough to cover the debt service like we told the lender, and then we start proceeding with the lender down. So obviously a lot of this is going on during the same time, and a lot of them, like you said, are interwoven. So like, hey, we got to get this from the insurance or from the seller to make sure that the income is this, and then we take that number to the lender, and it says, yes, it covers the debt. We need this type of insurance. So we take the insurance quote and we talk to the lender and say, what kind of coverages do you need, on the loan? And so that changes all that, all that stuff's going on concurrently. And I feel like that's relatively straightforward and easy to understand, is like that we're just plugging and playing with the math for those types of processes in the due diligence. Some of the other, you've asked before is like, hey, what is your trigger point for walking away? What would make you, and obviously if something comes in significantly more expensive than we expect, the risk factors go off. Why is it more expensive? If we can't explain that, oftentimes it's just that, hey, we need to back away from this or walk away because it's something that we didn't expect happening. And if I can't explain why, it's too risky, because what's to keep it? If I can't explain why it's this expensive, what's to keep it from going even more expensive the next year in another way I can't explain? You know what I mean? So that's a reason to walk away. Something's way outside of line, and the risk factors go up. I hate risk. I hate unnecessary risk. And we won't undertake that risk if we can't explain it. So that's one reason we would walk away. Another reason is if the math, we're very, very conservative underwriters. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but basically, as we can sense our margins getting squeezed by a few things coming in more expensive than we expected, income isn't as good, even if it still technically fits in our box. If we just erode so much of the margin, that slop that I talk about, that we build into our underwriting by assuming things will be more expensive, we start eroding that means I don't have wiggle room anymore. So even though it might still fall within our numbers, if I start finding that some of the wiggle room that I usually have and I assume that I'm going to have, now I'm pressing right up against, I have no more room for error. If I sense that I'm running out of room for error in the, maybe we can't raise rents as fast because construction or renovations take longer, things like that, all the stuff that I've built into my underwriting. If I start running out of ways out, because who knows when a hurricane is going to come over or the next COVID is coming through, things that I can't account for, I need that built into my numbers. And I start losing that confidence in my numbers. And that is another reason to walk away, is even though the math may still technically be mathing, if I start eroding my margins, I lose that comfort level, I guess.
I think that was actually where I was coming from with this, because if the math doesn't work, if all of a sudden something is way more expensive than you thought, and you're like, oh, well, we'll be losing money or barely making any, and there's got to be better opportunities. Sure. That's pretty straightforward.
Right.
Now, sometimes, like if you got a crazy insurance quote, for instance, and we've been here, you can try to get a better one somewhere else. And, it's not necessarily the end, but it can be if you're facing that number. I think more what I'm interested in, and I don't want to call this a human element, but I mean, I guess in a way it really has to be. I mean, who else is doing this? It's not robots, not yet. Is that if things start eroding, when margins start eroding, let's say, and I don't mean, chunks falling off the side of the hill. I mean, just slowly receding.
They're tightening. Yeah.
And again, this is against our very conservative shorelines.
So I know I've got room.
Yeah, you've got room. Yeah. And you know that I am projecting low and other things bad high. And I'm fairly confident that it's not going to go this way. All those things being it. I guess I was wondering which of those things eroding saps your confidence more and which of them you're more like, no, that's going to be okay. I guess would be an interest. And I know you're probably going to think through this and not let any of those feelings get in the way of the decision, but it would just be interesting to know which one of those, I guess, just is more of a tailwind to you as as an operator, or a headwind, I guess, a headwind.
Yeah, I know what you meant. I think it's so hard not to say it depends, because it does.
Well, I mean, because some scenarios would be cool too, but
Yeah, well, so let's say,
which feels more intractable would be another way of saying it, right?
This goes in hand with knowing your market very well. But basically, if I know what a similar property should be running for, I can take all of the expense numbers I'm getting from the seller with a grain of salt. Same with income. If there's another property down the road that either I own or I know the market very well, I know what income should be for the property, and for some reason the seller isn't attaining it, I don't want to say overlook, but I those don't slow me down as much. It's when the expenses and the income, I would say, if just something that is one of my underlying assumptions that I don't know, you can call it a gut or whatever, but one of my underlying assumptions isn't proving to be true, and I can't really even put a description on that, because it could be like, hey, I know that I should be able to get a property for X amount of dollars. It'll rent for around Y amount a month. But if I'm starting to find via market surveys or neighboring properties that one or the other isn't true or something like that, or other things that are happening, again, I feel like I'm not being very specific, but I can't be. It's just some assumptions that I go in. If my assumptions start not being true, then that gives me a lot more pause than the property not matching up to the market, if that makes sense. Because I know the market, my assumptions are going to align with the market, because I know it. If it's I'm never going to buy a property in a market I don't know, so because I'm going to learn it if I'm interested in a property. I guess it's when my assumptions about a market or my knowledge starts to tend to not be true. That's when I get a lot more skittish, if that makes sense. So I have my underlying assumptions, and when they're being challenged, that tells me I've got something wrong. I may not, but it makes me think I might have something wrong, and I'll get a lot more pause, and I'll start being a lot more hesitant, I guess, is a way to put it.
That is the phrasing. That's a great phrase, which gives you more pause, because whether or not it actually affects your decision in the end, that is what I was actually interested in, is just you as an operator, which one gives you more pause. And that's interesting, because I would have thought things outside your control would have given you more pause than things inside your control. But because, for instance, you're saying if these numbers aren't matching up with what I thought that they would do, I can know whether or not that's the operators currently or the market. But you're saying that there's a next step. And I think there's a next step, which is, the things that I thought I had control of or I had a handle on that apparently I don't. That's the biggest.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. 100%. Okay. Yeah. So there's, and that's a good segue, because another thing that we could talk about is the things outside my control. And when we were talking before we hit play or record on this, is we talked about certain non-quantifiable things. There's non-mathematic things about a property that I assume how I'm going to feel when I get and walk the property, walk the units, meet some tenants, that kind of thing, all of which is going on in due diligence, and you can't always do ahead of time. But my assumptions about the feel of the property, the neighborhood, and the initial or the immediate area around the property can definitely be challenged during due diligence, and that's happened before too. Like, for instance, and this one I can tell you is like, if I go to a property with a lot of units and I go there and during the day in the middle of the
Mm.
week and nobody's at work, everybody's home. Now there may be other circumstances where a lot of these people, maybe there's a factory in the area that employs a lot of people that, night shift, whatever. There's plenty of ways to explain that. Nurses, we have a lot of nurses in some of our units, so they'd be night nurses, and so they're asleep at home during the day, and they work shifts at night. A lot of travel nurses,
Right.
things like that. There's plenty of ways to explain that, but your little spidey like that gives me a pause when I walk a property. I'm like, hey man, it's Wednesday at 1 p.m. Almost every unit has a car in front of it. Maybe not a lot of people have the jobs that I was assuming they had.
Mm.
And I can't take over and replace an entire clientele of a property right away. So that gives you pause. And then you also, something else you can't, like, you're restricted on your access to a property before the due diligence period. So you get to walk a unit or two, maybe sometimes you get to see more units of a property before you get under contract and start that official due diligence period. But you're restricted on the time of day, when you can show up on the property, things like that. But during due diligence, you can coordinate with the seller to get access a lot of times. So you can drive the property on the weekends. You can drive the property at night. You can, you have a lot more access to be able to do things and see. Hey, if you only go to a property during the day, you might not notice that the lighting's really bad
Mm.
in the evening. Which again, that's something you can fix. But if it's really bad in the whole neighborhood, that's what a potential tenant's going to see when they come in, and you go, "Whoa, this doesn't feel nearly as safe at nighttime as it does during the day in the whole area." Things like that, where you can just kind of go, I assumed one thing, but my assumptions are being challenged by what I'm experiencing during due diligence. And that's not a monetary thing. That's not,
Right.
nobody hands me a report. That's honestly, that's a feel. Would I feel safe? Would I let my wife and kids walk through this parking lot at night, kind of thing? And sometimes that's just not the case. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's unsafe at all. It just mean, maybe that would just change our underwriting to, hey, we got to put
Bunch of
lighting
streetlights
up.
in.
We got to
Yeah,
improve
yeah,
the
yeah.
lighting. That's going to change our cost and our electrical, but all these things. So, we adapt, and none of that is a no go per se, but assumptions that I make in the underwriting can be challenged, and that may change whether or not we want to get the property. Not based on the kind of hard data from an inspector found a huge foundation error across the property, or foundation issue that would be hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix. That's obviously a real problem that would change our underwriting too. And that's a hard data point. But some of these data points aren't necessarily, they're a little bit more ethereal, if you will, than a hard
Yeah,
fact.
because in your scenario, not maybe people aren't as employed as we thought. Although with the way things are these days, that would be tough to completely prove based just on where the cars are when. But technically, I'm at home all day.
Yeah, but I also know, because there's
You
plenty
know
of
the kind
work
of
from home
jobs that are
people.
around. Yeah.
But we also know what the clientele of the type of apartment that we go after. Like, it's not, nobody is in any of our apartments running a multi-million-dollar business and on teleconferences all day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're blue collar.
Unless
They
they're
got
a
to go to
very
their work.
interesting individual who is just saving money.
Yeah, exactly. There's always one quirky
That
dude.
would be a very interesting man or woman to run into who's just living
Yeah.
drastically below their means.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking more about the lighting thing, or it doesn't feel great, and that seems like a moment of, it could be a tough call. It's because it would be okay. What the numbers are fine, right? And the numbers could include, well, we can put lights everywhere and we're still fine. In this scenario,
cameras,
we can just throw them up everywhere. We can
Gate,
definitely make this feel way more safe. We have the control to make that happen, and we don't feel like it's not because we saw people skulldugging around or stuff like that. It's just a feeling I got walking through. I think I could fix that feeling, but you still would have the feeling, right? Because you haven't fixed the problem yet. You'd have to project that this will fix it. And next time I walk through afterwards, would I feel the same way? Right. And that's a moment where it's instinct and feeling are running up against even maybe good numbers. Maybe you could throw up, like I said, we could light that place like a football
Fort
stadium.
Knox. Yeah.
And would that change it? And that's an interesting, I guess, kind of the tension that I was sort of looking for, where you have to make a call. Maybe the numbers say one thing, but your gut is like, I don't know. The other thing, go ahead, and then I'll
bring it back. And a lot of times they play together too. So you go, it's a momentum thing too. So like, let's say if all of our assumptions are getting challenged in the money side. Like, okay, man, this is a little more expensive than I thought. That's a little more expensive. This is a little less expensive, but so if things will start falling opposite, they start to accumulate. So, okay, we had a few more expensive things. The feeling at night isn't great. The feeling in the surrounding neighborhood at night is even worse. Things start to add on to each other, and you go, all right, I hate to do it, but we have to walk from this one just because there's too many things adding up. So if I can handle one thing, two things. Yeah, exactly. So it's a cumulative answer. And again, it's not even a math cumulative. It's like, hey, the insurance is a little high, the seller's income was a little low, and also his numbers are not matching. There's potential for a little bit of misrepresentation on his part. And I don't like the feeling at night. I don't want my property manager coming over here at night, kind of thing. And you just start stacking things, and then you go, it's just there's too much challenge to what we thought, and we'll go find a better one.
Yeah, and of course that's the other thing where I guess I was going to bring this, because I would love to throw some kind of like Raleigh problem-esque situation where you get insurance numbers of your life, like you can't believe they're so low, and the income's actually higher, and there's all these things going your way, and then all of a sudden there's a major foundation issue, and it's like, well, we would still make money, it would still be good, but there's so much we would have to do to get to that point, even if the numbers work. It's like, do we want to just say no, we'll find another one? Like, that's kind of the thing, because that is the variable that when you're talking about due diligence of just deciding about a property, that's pretty straightforward a lot of times. But when you're thinking about, okay, this one versus the one we could find,
the next opportunity. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's
good point.
Good stuff.
And I think a lot of that comes back to the point you mentioned earlier is the controls. Like, if the only risks fall under something that I can control, aka a foundation issue, or the roofs are going to have to be replaced, then but everything else looked good, all the feel was great, so it's a numbers, or it's a something, but it's something I can control internally, then maybe we go back to the seller and we go, hey, here's what we thought, what we based on, but it turns out we're going to have to replace all these roofs in the first year. We did not enter this with that assumption. You said nothing about old roofs. Our inspection found this. So it doesn't even have to be a misrepresentation. He just, it's our responsibility to find what's wrong with the roofs. He doesn't have to tell me, hey, they're probably pretty old. You might gonna have, he may or may not. But we could go, hey, we entered assuming this. That's not correct. What we can do is we could get a credit from the seller potentially. Hey, maybe we split the cost of these roofs. Because he's going to have to replace them in the next year if he doesn't sell. That, you know what I mean? So it's not like he's completely, it's not a zero game for him. He's going to have to do something. So we say, hey, we'll split the cost with you. Maybe you reduce your price by half the cost of the roofs, or give us a credit for half the cost, whatever it might be. We can negotiate that out. And then the only misgivings I had are things I can control. And we've built that margin back in by getting a seller credit. Then I could be back all ahead full again. So there's ways to get back into the comfort zone, I guess. And if he refuses, then potentially I would just say, well, we'll find it. We'll find the next one.
Right. It's interesting. You talked about all the things kind of adding up, the small things, right? And I guess that's kind of the erosion thing. That becomes both numbers, calculations, and just psychology, right? You're just like,
sure,
okay, there's just too many little things here. That's the bad snowball. We like to talk about snowballs a lot, like growing version. That's like the bad version of that. Yeah. Also apologies to Kenny Loggins, but we want to be in the comfort zone, not the danger zone.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'm sure I could come up with a number of other scenarios, but I guess we can probably cut it off there. This is an inflection point. We can choose to walk at this point. As always, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned. Maybe
had fun.
Maybe you had fun. Maybe you had one moment like, or maybe you're just think our assessments of college basketball are stupid, whatever the case may be, we would love for you to. That's impossible, but I'm throwing out far-fetched scenarios. That was the episode today. So we would love to hear from you about anything that you would like to reach out and contact us about, whether that be questions, comments, want to get involved, want to know more about us. Maybe we haven't been clear on how exactly you can jump on calendars and or submit forms. If that's the case, we're more than happy to help you. As always, you can email, DM on LinkedIn. You can comment on the Substack, comment on Spotify, comment on YouTube. Hit us up through the chat bot on the website, capitalvelocityinvestments.com. Matthias and Jordan at capitalvelocityinvestments.com. Those are mutual. We don't have a shared Matthias and Jordan email account.
No, that would be so confusing.
Yeah. Anyways, you want to get a hold of us and chat us up, we would love for that to happen. Otherwise, we appreciate you hanging out with us, and we hope you come back next week for another edition of the Get Invested podcast.